Well, the BRICS countries certainly left their caps lock on, and they're having their annual major summit in one of the biggest global events that's taken place in Russia for years. And to top it all off, it's being hosted by Vladimir Putin, who's been indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. And now joining me to discuss this gathering meant to counter Western influence is Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief at the Kyiv Post.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for joining me. So with all these leaders attended, I think there's over 20 countries in attendance, and of course, many global leaders attending this summit. What message does this send to the West and to Ukraine?
Well, the key message is that there is a anti-Western constellation built around Russia and China, primarily, and that once upon a time, some of you will remember, there used to be a non-aligned movement in the 50s and 60s, which was manipulated largely by Russia, the Soviet Union in those days, but at least the Soviet Union kept a distance and pretended it wasn't part of this so-called non-aligned. This group actually overtly says that it is against Western influence, that it is challenging the primacy, as they see it, of Western institutions in international relations. So, it's presenting itself as a power bloc with economic and political elements in it. And of course, it's not a united front. So when you talk about Ukraine, I mean, there are different positions there. Apart from Russia, everyone is for peace. Modi, India's for peace. China wants peace, etc. But peace at what price? And peace, in whose favor? So at the end of the day, it's a kind of PR exercise. For Russia, it's important to show it that the Russians, despite sanctions and despite the war crimes, that they're not isolated. And for the others, it's good to be seen in this company, to be taken seriously, even if their countries are not particularly heavyweights on the international scene.
The president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, fell and hit his head. And he therefore sent his foreign minister to the meeting in his place. Yet we have information from the Russians that UN Secretary General Guterres is rumored to be attending. So he didn't attend the Ukraine Peace Summit, but he is attending the BRICS Summit with an indicted war criminal. How do you view this?
I'm not surprised. I was at a press conference in Lvov, a year ago when Erdogan was also there from Turkey, the president, and Zelensky and Guterres. And all Guterres spoke about was about the grain corridor, about saving the world from starvation. Not one word about the suffering of the Ukrainian people, about the war crimes or anything. I was sitting in the second row. I know Guterres. I used to work with him when he was the High Commissioner for Refugees. I was very close to him then. We were on first-name basis. He knows what the world is about, and he knows what Russia represents. But for some reason, even though he's not going to be renewing his tenure, he seems afraid to actually call Russia, Putin, to account and remind them that they are a Security Council member that is grossly violating the UN Charter. So, the Kyiv Post recently ran a piece by one of our authors where they said this is disgusting. Really, this is not what we expect from a UN Secretary General. The traditions of Dag Hammarskjöld or other brave, courageous UN Secretary Generals seems to be forgotten.
BRICS countries make up 45% of the world's population and about a quarter of their GDP. Is this truly a threat to the West and the rules-based order?
I don't think it's a threat because, let's face it, really it amounts to several countries that have common interests. They're authoritarian states, despotic states. We're talking about Russia, China, and the rest, India, and the such-like countries are fence-sitters. The new ones that are coming are looking for economic, perhaps, advantages. And they are split amongst themselves. For example, India and China, though they are reported to have reached some agreement today or yesterday on border demarcation. But basically, they are split. For example, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is not particularly friendly with Saudi Arabia that wants to join. What is worrying, I think, is that that they create a lot of noise, and they, the BRICS countries, and they detract attention away from the main issues. They present themselves as an alternative, shall we say, to the democratic world. And what is particularly worrying, I think, in this context is that not so much that Guterres is going, but the president of Turkey, a NATO member aligned with the West, is going to be there at this meeting, and that Turkey has requested to join.
Certainly. Well, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and ask you about Alexei Navalny's wife. She's given interviews lately. His wife, Yulia, said that she wants to run for president in Russia. Would she have a chance? Who, in your opinion, is either the best or really the true leader of the Russian opposition?
I think that's the weakness of Russia, that despite Putin being such a tyrant and Russia doing so badly in the war against Ukraine and being isolated, that there is no clear leader, there is no democratic leader that has emerged within Russia. Obviously, it's impossible because Navalny's fate, Nemtsov's fate, shows that you can't actually be publicly opposed to Putin in Russia. But even outside of Russia, there is no one clear, strong, articulate candidate. And she's very wishy-washy. Yes, there's sympathy for her because her husband was killed, but what kind of Russia does she want? What's her position on the war against Ukraine? And yes, she wants Western support, but is she prepared to denounce Russian imperialism and to say, yes, Russia will live within its boundaries and will be a law-based state? I'm not sure. You know, she and some of those that were recently released, political prisoners, they've sort of hedged their bets. You know, they want a big, strong Russia being different, but with a change of regime, you know, in their favor. But that's not particularly suitable for neighbors and for the democratic world. We want a clear position that regime change for the better, democracy, rules-based system, and abiding by the UN Charter.
Bohdan Nahaylo, Editor-in-Chief of the Kyiv Post, thank you very much for joining us tonight on World News.
My pleasure.
And that concludes this edition of World News. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.